everywhere, and then we'll start this again. So sorry that I'm not exactly ready, but I'm so excited to be here today to talk about covert narcissists and the games that covert narcissists love to play. Anyone who's been in a toxic relationship, you may not even have known that you were in a relationship with a covert narcissist until after the fact. You may have thought that you've met this fantastic person. They're very good at hiding and not being obvious when we meet them. Um, I know that there's been times that I thought I met the most sensitive, empathic person in the world, and I didn't know that I had actually was being that this person was very narcissistic because the way in which they hide. My phone's doing weird things here. The way that they hide. Sorry about that. Is that they hide behind sympathy versus empathy, and they hide behind being the victim. So you think you've met somebody who is actually having a rough go, and you don't realize that it's not that they're having a rough go, it's that they're actually toxic. And that the world centers around them, but instead of centering around the grandiosity, around everything that's all like so much, so wonderful, so big, the best of, instead they're the biggest victim. And one of the key things, and this is what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, is that they play passive aggressive mind games. They're the king and queen at mind games. And they do it in a way to where it makes it nearly impossible for you to confront them because it's hard to call them out. They'll do things that in fact when you do call them out, they'll flip it and say that now you're victimizing them and that they don't know what you're talking about. They'll play dumb and they'll go absolutely like they have no idea what you're talking about. So let's talk about the mind games that covert narcissists play. And I actually have a list. I have a list of 16 different ways that they do it, and I'd love to talk about the list. And then I'm going to stop and take your questions and talk about the way that you've experienced covert narcissism and how they've affected your life. I just thought of a story. This is how my ex did it. He knew that I had soap allergies and I can't use most topical soaps when I for cleaning up. I have to have specific soaps. I have to be very careful. And so we ran out of his favorite kind. We had mine. I tended to buy homemade soaps as a way to avoid the problem. I found that I don't have a problem with homemade soaps. So we ran out and he was borrowing mine. And mind you, mine was expensive and kind of hard to get a hold of. And so when we bought more of his and we got more of his in stock, I circled back and said, "Hey, I would love to have some of that soap back, that you've been using of mine." He goes, "Well, I threw it away." And he said, "I didn't know you wanted me to keep it." And I'm thinking, first of all, you threw essentially a whole bar away. You only used it for a few days. It's not like it's this tiny little like crumb of a bar. This is a whole complete bar that I could have used for 3 months, 4 months. And you threw it away. And yet what was so hard is he like ended up like, "Well, I didn't know that you wanted it." "What do you mean you don't know I want it? We go out of my way to buy this special soap. It's expensive." You see what I'm saying? Covert narcissists create it in such a way that you can't circle back and confront them because their claims are such that you'd have to prove it. Like, how would I get into his mind and prove that he didn't know that this was something important to me? I could prove to the behavior that the way we made a lot of effort to get this soap, but I couldn't prove that he didn't know. So let's talk about 16 different ways that covert narcissists use passive aggressive strategies to really get you in a super toxic way. And if you're new to me and you're new to maybe this platform or this channel, be sure to like it, maybe share it with somebody that you know right now is battling with a covert narcissist in their life. Maybe you know of somebody who has the perfect person in their life who's really struggling with a lot of passive aggressive strategies and they don't even realize it. They just know that they feel like they're running in circles, they're getting super exhausted, and they feel like they can never win. They just feel like it's just this circular, never-ending battle. So you might want to share it with it. Be sure to like it. So here are the 16 ways that they tie us up in knots. This one, I have a feeling you've seen a lot. And when I read it, like, this is interesting. Agreeing to do something with no intention to following through. How many of you ever experienced where you've been in a relationship with somebody and you brought up something and it's really important to you and you say, "Please, make sure that you do X, Y, Z." And then they say, "Sure, no problem, I got it." And yet you have that sinking feeling in your gut, this is never going to happen. I'm never going to see this done. I know that, kids, I'm thinking of my kids. A lot of times I'd say, yeah, take out the garbage. And we all know they're not going to take out the garbage. And yeah, that certainly is a dynamic. But when it's a partner, when you're actually relying on someone to carry their part out in the relationship, like I'm thinking, did you guys see that video of the guy who his wife asked him to buy, and I'm not picking on men, it happens to both men and women, but you have it where his wife asked him to pick up some pumpkin on the way home, and he got there and he didn't know exactly what size or something, and he texted her several times and she didn't respond. By the way, pumpkin's cheap. It never costs much money. It's like maybe under $2. And instead of just guessing and buying something and coming home with it, he actually went ahead and went home without it and said, well, she can just figure it out. Of course, she texted on the way home and he said, sorry, I'm already on my way. That would be to me a great example of a passive aggressive move. That's agreeing to doing something and then sabotaging it. Actually, that's not just no tension following through. That person actually sabotaged it. But that we often have happen. I know you could tell I had a lot of that happen to me when the first time I was in a relationship where I actually told somebody to ask them to please do something. They agreed and they did it. And I felt such relief. I mean, it's so wonderful to have somebody show up and actually follow through with what they're saying they're going to do. I mean, it's amazing how how wonderful it is to have another person in your life actually like helping you and holding things up with you. It's just amazing. Okay, number 2 is blame shifting. This is when they make it your fault. Like, let's use that pumpkin example. The fact that it's now her fault. She didn't call fast enough because when he texted, she wasn't available. I mean, she could have been caught up with the kids. Maybe there was a fire in the kitchen. And who knows why she didn't respond. But how many times have we always are right on the dot when somebody texts us? Of course we're not. But now it's her fault because she didn't respond instead of his fault for. And you know what? You knew. And that what's so powerful about that example is that he was angry, that he was kind of like, I hope this hurts her. You could feel that. And often those that blame shift, sometimes they're angry, but sometimes they don't want any accountability. It's just a way for them to offload the responsibility and to twist it by making it your fault or to make you feel bad about it. Like, how about the one where you bring up something to a girlfriend and you say, you always make me feel so bad. Why do you always have to do that? And then you end up thinking, shoot, I don't mean to do that. I'm not trying to make my friend feel bad. I'm just trying to talk about an issue that we had. I had a girlfriend like that. Whenever I bring up something, this person would twist it, circle it back, and said, I can't believe you think that of me. I'm thinking, well, I want to resolve the relationship so we're doing better, and now I'm the bad person for having an issue at all. So they're very good at kind of twisting it like that. No, it's not focused on women. I just happened to use the first example because the video was a man. That's why I used that. But just the second example was about a woman. The third is button pushing. Oh man, one of my sisters is masterful at pushing buttons. It's interesting how you can have a really close relationship with somebody and they know you so well that they actually know where you get triggered, what upsets you, what sets you off, what things you kind of need, and then they deliberately will throw wrenches into it as a way to create problems. Again, I had one of my sisters was super good at passive aggressiveness, and she just had a way of just like here's one that she used to do. We had a lot of fears, and we were on a dairy farm, and so one of the things our parents would ask us to do is to go into a granary, and literally there was no light in this granary. If you guys could ever picture pitch black, it was pitch black. I mean, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. And there's something kind of profoundly scary about pitch black. So anyway, we'd have to go into the granary with just a flashlight, that tiny little beam, and our parents would set us to find some type of grain, some nutritional thing they want to mix for the cow's feed. Like, go find some blah, 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 some magnesium. It's in a tan bag, and you're supposed to find this in pitch dark. Like, so we'd go in scared, looking for this thing, not daring to walk out, not having it. And my middle sister would say, do you hear that? I think I hear something. And then she'd she'd whirl and say, a rat or a wolf or something big. And we'd all tear off to the house and she'd beat us. I don't know why. She'd somehow beat us. And then she'd lock the door and we'd be like banging on it, like, let us in. And anyway, she was so good at pushing buttons. So yeah, button pushers is really like another great way to really set somebody up. But it can be subtle. I would also say button pushing is dog whistling. Have you guys heard of dog whistling? This is a really toxic thing and a very passive aggressive thing. So say, for example, This often happens with parents, sometimes do this with kids. So say you have a kid that you're frustrated with and you wish they'd get better grades, and then they introduce you with their friends and a friend, and they happen to tell you that this friend is like top of the class or something. And then the parent will look at the kid who's being introduced and say, well, you must study hard. And then look at the other kid, their own kid, as a hint of like, and you don't. And the kid who's standing there introducing his parents to the friend knows that was an indirect message as a jab about the kid's study habits. And so the kid can't say anything, because if he does, it just looks like an idiot, because now he's reacting and there's no context for the reaction. So dog whistling is another really great example of passive aggressive move. So number 4 is grudge holding or keeping score. So, and what these people do is they'll have a mental tally. Oh, thank you so much for the gift. A mental tally of everything that you do wrong. And then next time you bring it up, they'll use it against you. Like, you remember that time when you did XYZ, or here's how it happened to me. My ex was you guys all know he was a serial cheater. And there had a relationship that I had some feelings about, that it wasn't the best relationship in the world. And he said, well, that's just as bad as my cheating. Like, no, it's not. But he would kind of like keep these records of things that I'd ever like admitted out loud to him or acknowledged or didn't go right. And then when things would go wrong, he'd use it against me. So watch out for those who are using holding grudges and keeping score, because that's another classic passive aggressive move. Here's one we all have experienced, and I think women do this more than men, but I've seen men do it too, and that is play dumb. I've watched women like, I don't know, and you know that they know, and it's their way of like getting out of it and passing the buck. Now, sometimes we do that. I admit it, that we do that because we just know that the men around us like to feel helpful, and it gives them a job, and it just kind of goes better. But sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's a way to actually frustrate the other person and to get off from having to do it. So in other words, if you play dumb, then you're not going to be asked to take the task on. You're going to be more likely they're going to go over or around you or not include you. So it's a really fantastic way of getting out of things. And it also is just a really great way to upset somebody. You know, I had a friend share with me that whenever she would confront her partner about what went wrong, then they would say, well, I don't know why that happened. Yeah, I know and I've seen parents do this, where you say something like, you know, I really needed help with XYZ, and like, no, I don't remember that you said that. What do you mean you don't remember? The conversation happened 2 days ago. How do you not know? So yeah, it's just a great way to evade, and then just takes the subject right off the table. So what do you say to that? It's really hard to combat that, because then you're fighting about whose reality is correct. Like, I know I told you. No, I don't remember you telling me. So the 6th one is playing victim. And this is when you just manufacture or exaggerate hardship for sympathy to avoid criticism. I've seen this one happens in a lot, not just this way. This one happens in a lot of different ways. Like, by the way, here's one I just saw. A content creator created a video on it where he was talking about where when we attack victims for having a victim mentality, that's actually, they don't have a victim mentality. They're actually victims. But who the victim mentality is, the abusive person who claims they can't help themselves while they abuse other people. That's actually where the victim mentality is. It's the one who claims that they can't help themselves, or they have trauma, or they just need understanding, or they're trying to do the best that they can. That's more of the playing the victim. It's not actually the victim itself who's talking about what's happened to them. It happened. It's real. It's the one who claims they don't know that they're doing it, and that they didn't mean to do it, or they have all these, bad history. Again, how many times have we met an abusive person and they roll out their track record of all the people who's done them wrong, and yet they don't talk about all the wrong they've done as a way to justify what they're doing. So really watch out for somebody who always sees themselves as the underdog, or always sees themselves as at the mercy of other people, and fails to sort of see how they can improve things themselves. The classic one is you meet a new person, a new date, and the new date tells you that every relationship they've had before is never their fault. Well, no, that's not true. I mean, some relationships, they've had a piece of it. Maybe if they had an abusive person or two, that I can see that, but every relationship is never their fault. I would find that one a hard one. really hard. Okay, number 7, procrastination. This is just a person who's deliberately late, not a person who struggles with procrastination. This is a person who's deliberately late as a form of resistance. Say, for example, you give somebody a task. I think of this at work. You give somebody a task at work, they don't want to do it, and then they drag their feet, and the deadline's coming up, and you're feeling this increasing pressure because the department's hanging on the need for this, and then they just don't show through, or they show up and it's half-hearted effort, or it's not a good style, it's not done well, and sure enough, it sabotages you. And this is a great way for people who really don't have the wherewithal to say no, I'm not doing this, and then take the consequences of that. Or for those who are indirect, or maybe those are those that just want to sabotage other people in the department. Maybe this is a way for them on purpose to hurt things. They know they're hurting things, and they're doing this as a way to sort of just form resistance. It's a great way to do that. Okay, number 8 is sabotage. And we're doing 8. This is number 8 out of 16. Sabotage, and then we'll take your questions today. Number 8 is sabotage. And this is where, here's a great example of this. And girls do this a lot to each other, but maybe guys do it too. And I've seen some guys do it, but I've seen a lot of girls do it. You have a friend, and it's that this friend has a lot of things that goes really well for this person. And something goes really great for you, and you should, by the way, show up for them. You celebrate their successes. And then you get a success and you ask them to be there for you, and then at the last minute they can't. And they bow out with some excuse and they don't show up. Oh man, and so it sabotages your experience of you celebrating it. So you end up celebrating it alone. It sucks when that happens. That is so classic and terribly, terribly hurtful. And it's so hard to confront this, because if you say, why did you say yes to that? Well, I didn't know, and I made this commitment first. I mean, usually I have all these great excuses, and you just end up feeling like, I don't even know what to say, because I'm not going to win here. It's just really going to hurt. So watch out for somebody who does that. Number 9 is sarcasm. I know that, in fact, I've made this comment before about poking fun at other people and saying something is a joke when it really to that person is not a joke, is cruel. And then they say, oh, well, you just don't have that kind of sense of humor we have in this area. You know what? I will die on this hill. In fact, Freud said the same thing. He said that jokes are often an unconscious expression of hostility. So when we make fun at somebody, especially when we know that there's no humor in this, and we do this and we know it's harmful, that's a passive aggressive maneuver. We know that we're making a jab at that person, and here's the other thing, we're betraying them. Because a healthy relationship, there's respect that goes back and forth. And when we jab at somebody and we know that we're undercutting them and we're willing to do that, that says we don't think a whole lot of them. We don't think very highly of them. So be really careful when somebody uses dark humor or irony or passes something off as just, you can't take a joke. No, it's not that you can't take a joke. It's that they can't express their feelings directly. The problem is in their court, not with you. All right, number 10 out of 16 is the silent treatment, or ignoring you. I was today writing a newsletter for next week on toxic in-law drama, and my grandmother would literally ignore anything that my mom would say. It was as if my mom wasn't in the room. And have you ever had that happen where someone literally will pretend that you're not talking when you're talking? It is so undercutting when somebody does that. It's basically turns you into an invisible person. So yeah, or how about when you're in an argument and you're trying to work something through, and suddenly they just walk out, and the conversation's done. And you also know with a person like that, there's no bringing it back up, because we all know what we hear. You just can't let anything go. So it's just really painful when someone uses silent treatment as a way to confront the relation, as a way to avoid confrontation, and a way to sort of not deal with things that have to be dealt with. All right, number 11, social exclusion. Oh, now I wonder, actually there's only 14 of them, not 16, I was wrong. Okay, so this is number 11 of 14. I would love to know if men do this, but women do this a lot, where you leave somebody intentionally off a party list. So you know that this person really wants to be in the group, and you're keeping them out, and it's a way for you to feel like, kind of the mean girl thing. And then there's a party, and you make sure they know they don't make the list. Yeah, that's super hurtful, very toxic. Number 12 is a hard one to identify, and I don't think it's all that common. It's called stubbornness. It's usually refusing to change a behavior or viewpoint just to stall a decision or to frustrate a person. So that may be, say that you two are working on a conflict or working on maybe you're making a big decision and they just won't make their minds up. I guess I have seen that. Like, say, for example, you're trying to plan a family trip and your partner just won't make a decision. Like, should we stay at an Airbnb or should we go find a hotel? I don't know. I haven't decided. And then you're like, well, yeah, but we're losing time and the best places to stay are filling up. And I don't know. I haven't decided. And then they just keep pushing the decision down the road and you can't make any move forward because they don't tell you what they want to do. So yeah, stubbornness is a really great way to sort of stall stuff, frustrate people. And then here's one, and I know you guys have seen it in your family, is sullen behavior. I had a my partner did this too. If he was forced to do something he didn't want to do, he would just pout. That's what I call it, pout. So he just had a crappy mood, and they would, it's like, why are you in the room? Why did you bother coming to the party if this is how you're going to behave? Because you're just making it miserable for everybody. So they're like, well, I'm here, and you asked me to be here. So which is like, you know what? I'm better off if you had not been here. So it's really a great way just to sort of like express dissatisfaction and disapproval and to sort of rain on your parade. Really, it really ruins the experience. And the last one, and we all know what this one is, there's so many videos on it, we talk a lot about it, is weaponized incompetence. And that is when you act like you don't know how to do something as a way to get out of it. I was sharing on the podcast this week on the podcast about passive aggressiveness that my oldest was masterful at this. I would say, okay, clean the toilets. I don't know. And then I would even give him the utensil to use to clean the toilet and show him. I would demonstrate and then hand it to him. And then he'd like weak wrist it. And so he couldn't do it. And then I would show him again, knowing that he was I'm purposely playing dumb. And again, he would be like, I just can't make it work, do something. And I would think to myself, you know what? You have 2+ hours of work ahead of you, plus dinner, plus, cleaning up, plus bedtime. Just do it yourself. I would think, okay. And then I just stopped asking him. Now, most of you would say, who are really good parents and you didn't raise my son, you would say, oh, you shouldn't have done that. That was a bad decision. It did come back and haunt him, though. This is what happened. He told me he got to college and had a dorm room and he had to clean his own toilet and he didn't know how. So he said he had to literally get Google out with a YouTube and watch how to clean a toilet. And I thought, see, well, that's what you get for now, letting me teach you when I wanted to teach you. So those are the 14 ways of how people can be passive aggressive and really screw stuff up for us. So I'm now going to start looking at your comments because I've not been watching. I know you guys have been commenting a lot, but I'd love to hear which of these you've experienced, which ones really frustrate you the most, and what do you do about it? I'd love to know how you have gotten out of it when it's happened to you, because it can be really, really frustrating. I often find that I tend to opt out. When I really get into a situation where people are really doing this end run around me, I just started to I'm not going to, I bail out of the relationship pretty quickly these days. But in the old days, I used to put up with a lot. I used to think maybe I'm being too, I gaslight myself. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe they don't mean anything by it. Maybe they're being sincere. Maybe they, and I would make all these allowances. These days, I don't tend to make allowances for that kind of crap. I tend to sort of see it as hurtful and try to affect me, and I don't really have any patience for it. So I tend not to have many of those kinds of people in my life who do these types of things. But which ones trick you up the most? And let's talk about what to do when you're facing it. So so On My Way says, he twists my reality, telling me I'm crazy because I stand in my truth. So On Your Way, what do you do? On My Way, what do you do when that starts to happen? And Jana, it's so great to see you on the channel today. I see that you just don't participate anymore where you used to try and fix it. And Terry, I'm so happy you're here too. I'm really happy that you've joined us today and are talking about it. Same with TFFF. I'm happy to meet you as well. And Megan, I'm so thrilled that you're here as well. It's great. I'm so glad you guys are here talking about it. But yeah, I agree with you, Megan. Blame shifting is just a sucky experience. And the other one is, I recently had a friend tell me that she was vulnerable around something. And after she was vulnerable, she said, I get really scared saying anything vulnerable because I don't want it used against me. And I'm thinking, geez, I wonder, like, what kind of world are you in that would be like that? But how many of us have been in situations like that where we have learned that to say anything is scary, is dangerous because we've got someone who's grudge holding or keeping a records of things that we admit to, and they plan to bring it up. I heard another, this was another TikTok that I really loved. There was a TikToker who actually says that she plants what she calls a ringer. So this is what she does. I thought this was, now I don't really want to spend the energy trying to do this, but I did think it was an interesting idea. So this is what she does. She actually tells one piece of information that's not completely accurate or or is an exaggeration, something that she doesn't really care about, but she acts like it's a super big deal to her. And then she waits to see what this person does with this information. Like she may say, "I'm really have a fear of whatever. I found out my mother-in-law has a fear of birds. Let's pretend you use that example. I have a real fear of birds. I don't know why, but even the shadow of them really throws me off." And then she waits to see what this person does with it. And the minute they bring it up, then she knows this is a toxic person, and she ends the relationship. I thought that was ingenious. And I'd love to know if any of you have ever tried that. You know, if you've ever planted a piece of data that's actually not accurate, but you treat it like it's something like a vulnerability, like it's big news to you, and then you watch what that person does with it. I thought it was brilliant too, SJ. I thought it was really fascinating that they did that. Um, yeah, on my way said, you did say something. I know you said something, right? Oh, no, you didn't follow up. Okay, stonewalling, but not talking about the. Yeah, stonewalling is really, really toxic when it happens. It's very crazy making. I have found the best thing to do about it is um, to not be rattled by it. They want an attempt to control you, part of it, and they're also telling you what you can and cannot talk about it. And so I would also, one thing you could do, it might not work, TFFF, but you might say to them, "Hey, you walked out in that last conversation. We never had any closure." You could do that. So there's one way to get around it, is just to circle back and then ask for them to have a conversation. Now the person is likely to go ahead and do it again, but you also can then just say to them, the fact that we don't have these conversations, then we're not going to, this is something that's not going to happen. Then you just could set a limit around it. But I honestly, here's where I'm with it. Treat it like a holiday, which is not easy. I've had people stonewall me. It's not easy. I don't like it. I want to follow up on it because it feels very, very wrong. But treat it like a break from that person, and then really rethink why you're in this relationship, because essentially what you're being told by that behavior is there's never going to be any resolution around some topics ever, which means you've got big areas you guys are never going to come together around. And I personally, I don't want that. That's not a kind of relationship that I'm willing to entertain. So it maybe create some really thinking for you about what to do about it. Hey, Terry, I'm so sorry to hear that you're dealing with lying, denying, cheating, and even pet abuse and house destruction. Those are the times where sometimes you have to make a plan of how you're going to leave. And sometimes it can take years to get out, but you start to like plan ahead and say, "I'm not going to stick around for this because this person's dangerous." To me, that's just outright dangerous. Um, yeah, on my deep down on my way said I knew there was something wrong with him, but it always made me really sad. I know, and I just put up a video that's really going big in TikTok about letting go of potential. I didn't post it on YouTube, that's why you guys are not aware of it, but we sometimes fall in love with a person's potential. We know they could be doing better than they're doing, and even we can see the beauty inside this person. And here's the other thing: often people hide the areas of themselves they feel the most broken, but we actually see it as the most beautiful parts of them, and we wish they would just like be okay with letting us in there and sharing more about it. And instead they lock us out, and and they defend, and they use shame, and then they argue and defend and attack, and it ends up making it so ugly. They by them hiding this broken piece that has so much potential to be beautiful, it becomes something super ugly and abusive. And it's, to me, that's heartbreaking. My ex, there was parts that I thought, if my ex would turn his life around and really have this big moment, this kind of dark night of the soul crisis, and came to terms with himself and made some massive changes, his potential is so massive. He for one, his charisma is so huge. He's so dynamic and so likable. he could make a huge impact for the world, and instead he's harming the world instead of impacting it. And to me, that is the heartbreak of this whole thing. And I fell in love with the potential. I mean, if you read the story Love You More, you can see my grief as I see this beautiful, lovely person underneath all this awful behavior. And I thought that person was incredible. You know, Robin, I can't imagine when it's your own child. I cannot imagine how that must feel. And Jessica, so good to see you here. And I know that, yeah, letting go of potential is terribly painful, so hurtful because we want the best for each other, and then we can see these beautiful things inside of each other, and we want that person to become a full thing, and we know if they were to step into the potential, that then we could have this amazing relationship with them around that potential. And it's just so painful. I know, Sunshine, you're right. When it's our parents, one of the things I've faced is what my parents are facing, becoming elderly and close to the end of their life. My dad passed away in 2011, and I never got to make it right with him. I mean, I was in a bad spot with him when he died suddenly. He drowned. I never got to make it right with him, and um, I think I even feel emotional saying this, is that to know that it could have been something that it never will be is another level of grief. It's another level of grief, and it's so hard. Yeah, Jessica, you and me. I've had a lot of narcissistic friends. I've had to realize I've had to clean my out my social support system and start over. I really have had to do that. I realize that they do add to the trauma. They do add drama to my life, and it just makes it a mess. And it's hard because sometimes that means we have to go back to square one and start over, just to start from square one and rebuild, and then really evaluate everyone. And here's the part I find super depressing, is that it's hard to find healthy people. There's not as many healthy people as you'd wish that there really are, especially as we get older in life. There's less opportunities because people already have their friend group. It's like their dance card's already filled. It's very hard for us to fill it with other, new people. They don't really make room for new relationships, so that can be super tough. Oh, oh, Fred, oh, unfortunately, your ex's name is the same name as me. Well, I'm not her, and I'm very different. that's that's funny. Oh, and Mary Taylor, you just shared. It told me you shared the live with 10 friends. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's hard, Kate, Kate and Sunshine, when we see that we could barely have an amazing relationship with our parents or even our sibling. I mean, my sister passed away. Now it's 2 years are coming up, and one of the things you're going to see me as I get close to June, I start to feel I'm a person that dates mean a lot to me. They mean a big deal. Very mindful of dates, and yeah, it is depressing. Just like I agree. And so my sister passed away on June 10th. I'm sorry. My husband died on June 10th. Brad, my first husband, died on June 10th, and my sister died on June 4th. No wonder June is starting to, I mean, you're May, so we're a month, less than a month away, and I'm feeling myself getting sadder and sadder as that's happening, as I'm getting closer to those dates. And it is tough because, these people, they mean so much to us, and losing them, it's hard to find other healthy people. But it's also the relationships. My sister, for example, was a chronic abuse victim, went from one catastrophic relationship to another. Oh, thank you so much for that gift. And it was heartbreaking, heartbreaking to see her pass away and never have had a really good love, you know, and to know that I couldn't save her. And it was so, so painful. So, yeah, it's hard when we see these relationships are less than what they could be, and we really wish we could save these individuals. It's super, super hard. Dr. Kerry, onward, asks, could you get some closure by using a medium? Actually, we made a promise not to do that. I happen to have a faith that where it really doesn't create room for that, but I say you do you, you do. You do. Julie, I have had tons of loss in my life, unfortunately. Grief and I are on first name basis. We really are. I've learned to make room for grief and to live with grief. Grief is something that doesn't ever really end. I know that we end up thinking it does. It really doesn't. When we lose a person, that person is always a loss for the rest of our life. So, and I'm so happy that you're here today. Thank you so much for joining and talking to us about it. My mother's, so Moanne says, my mother-in-law's first language is dog whistling. Ew. I cope by playing dumb because if I entertain any of those games and jabs, it just makes me sicker. I agree with you. That's very wise of you just to like let it go, like super let it go. I appreciate that. I do think sometimes we recognize the toxicity and in the here's some suggestions about what we can do when we're facing this toxicity. And I gotta stop crying. I can stop the tears. Sometimes the best way we can do it is just not to engage. It's just to not bite. They want here's the thing that does not make sense to all of us. It really doesn't make sense. In when you're a healthy person, the best attention you want their affirmation and support. That's what healthy people are looking for. We really don't want somebody to be angry with us or challenge us or call us out. We're really not looking for that. That's bad in our opinion. And if there's no attention at all, we can live with that. It can be hard sometimes to feel kind of invisible, but it's tolerable. But what we don't want is we don't want to be shamed and we don't want to feel bad and we don't want to hear about the conflict. Now, that's not the mentality for a toxic person. The toxic person, here's their order of what they value. They love admiration and, getting all this claim and all of this attention. They love that. That means a lot to them. But what is next is not nothing. They would rather have you rise and be upset and have the drama than to have silence and nothing. To them, the worst experience is the nothing. So they're willing to rile you up in order to get something, get a charge, to know they've done something, to watch you like it's like spin. It's like a top. Have you guys ever played a top? They were big when I was a kid. Now I'm really dating myself. But we used, the kind that you'd like pump and you'd spin it, you set it up and spin it and spin it, spin it, and then you'd let it go and watch it go across the floor. That's what they're doing. All this passive aggressive stuff is to sort of like spin you up and then set you off, and then just sit back and watch you be really upset. And by us reacting, we're participating in it. So the most powerful thing that you can do is just simply to ignore it, which is really hard. It's super hard when that's happening because it's not our economy. We think, well, it just means it's an opportunity to work it out. We just need to like manage this and we can get on the same page, then things will be all right. But it's not. I mean, they don't want to be on the same page. They actually want to see you upset because it does a couple things. One is it's entertainment for them. And believe it or not, there's actually research that shows this, that they get a dopamine charge when they affect you. So here they're seeing you all stirred up and they're like, oh, great. This feels well, how you feel when you see something really happen wonderful and powerful, they get that when they hurt you and affect you. So they're getting a charge, they're getting off on that. And the other thing is it gives them control because now they know how to manipulate you. So they're literally like watching for the angles. So if you've ever paid attention to, if you're around somebody, maybe this is hard with a romantic partner, but watch with a really toxic person. They like memorize each person's hot spots. And they'll know this person is super sensitive about how they look. This person is super sensitive about being late. And this person is super sensitive about doing things just so. And then they'll work on those angles with those individuals in that way. So in other words, they don't like pick on everybody about how they look. They'll pick on the one who's upset about their looks. They'll pick on the one who's upset about doing everything right, and they'll like really ride them about how controlling they are. And then they'll pick on the one who doesn't like to be late. They'll be late on purpose or never be on time, or they'll dilly-dally and make sure that they're not, you know what I'm saying? They'll set it up and sabotage it. They're classic at studying you and then showing up in the way that affects you and harms you just to keep you stirred up. And again, because we're not used to seeing that as supply, that's a form of supply. We're not used to seeing that as a form of supply, but it is. And so when you bite and get upset, then they know, I won. I got them. Look what just happened here. Oh, that's great. Don't you love it? And then they stand back and like admire their work in getting you all upset. So our best way of combating that is simply not to bite. I know a friend of mine said, "Well, but maybe they'll think that you're letting them say feel that they're right." Well, maybe you might be by you not responding. They may think that they're right, but it also says that you're also showing them that they can't get under your skin. So to me, that I would rather have them think that I'm agreeing by not saying anything because I have not actually agreed. But I really don't want to give someone the power to know that they got under my skin because that is really giving them a powerful advantage over me. Yeah, it is really messed up on my way. I agree. It's super messed up, but understanding this helps you to be able to avoid it. It really helps you to avoid it. Yeah, so our WD channel, they do want supply, but sometimes supply is a negative reaction. Absolutely, I agree with you. It's a negative reaction. They're looking for that. And so we can do, my nose itches. If you guys notice I'm rubbing it, sorry about that. They will do anything to even just get you upset. So by being aware of that, then we don't play into it. I don't think it's they'll accuse you of the silent treatment, but I really don't think it's silent treatment when we just disengage. I think sometimes our best power is simply not to get all shook up. Um, I shared recently in a I wrote last week in my I put a newsletter out. So if you guys are looking for help and support on these topics, the topic I talk about each week is a topic I'm writing about, and I give a lot of practical suggestions, reflective questions. I have exclusive content, and I also give you a lot of other resources. So if you're looking like you want to dig deep into this topic, then consider becoming a subscriber for $5 a month. I have it through Coffee, and I also do it through Substack. But last week was on boundaries, how they're so good at pushing boundaries. And if you guys missed the live, I also have a live on it, so you can go back and watch the live. But I shared in that how that week I learned that my ex had used my email address with the government. He lives in another country. The government, with reporting taxes, he used my email address and said that they can get a hold of him at my address. So he's like trying to provoke me. Now, the old me would have emailed him, forwarded the letter, and said, "Hey, why did you use my email address with the tax, the IRS, that government's IRS? Why would you do that?" And these days are like, no, I'm not doing that. I mean, this was he did this deliberately. This he did two things in the same in one fell swoop. He did two things successfully. One, he's evading the government's effort to contact him, so he's evading the government. And the second thing he's doing is he's letting me know that he can still try to make things hard for me. Now, if I respond, I'm confirming that he's making things hard for me, and I'm not going to give him that kind of power. So I just noted it. I actually sent a letter to the government and said, "Hey, this is the wrong email address." I didn't even offer his correct email address. I just thought, I said, "I don't know this person because I don't know him." So I just said, "I don't know him." So that's the way I just kind of stepped out of that. MPD and me, you published a memoir. Yeah, that's awesome. I published one too called Love You More. We ought to swap memoirs. I'd love to see yours. You should contact me and we can talk about that. Yeah, I know. The government will find other ways. It's money. They want money. Absolutely. They do. Megan, I agree. 100%. They do get sick pleasure seeing us hurt. Absolutely. And it's sick that's for them, that's pleasure. It's really sick that happens. All of my family is out of my life. I was a scapegoat, even when my kids were out of my life. Yeah, true, sir. Someone just asked me to do another one on scapegoating. Thanks for reminding me on that. Um, I I was scapegoated, and I've seen a lot of scapegoating. Scapegoating's fascinating. Why people do scapegoats. I want to follow up on why. I had one of the reasons is because scapegoats tend to be the truth teller, but not always. Sometimes. But there are other reasons why people get scapegoated, like maybe two, three, four different reasons. I thought it'd be fascinating to do a video on why people get scapegoated. It's the scapegoat's the least, in a way, they have the most power because they can actually like tell the truth on the whole situation. They can reveal what's really going on. But in another way, scapegoats are also the least power. So when it comes to changing the system or getting it stopped, they have no ability to do that. But on the other hand, as far as blowing the whistle on it all, they have the most power with the uncovering stuff, but they have the least power changing it. Kate, no, not all narcissists are malignant. That's a great question. I actually know there are narcissists, I know of some personally, who are really well-meaning. Now, they don't do good things, but they mean well. They think they're doing good things. They don't see the way in which they're behaving harmfully because it's a defense mechanism. You're probably like, well, give me an for instance. So, for example, there are some that are like the hero type. They love to help other people, but because they love the attention they get, but they really see it as they're giving back to the world. They don't see it as attention seeking when it really actually is. And when they gaslight or cover stuff up, they just sort of see it as their efforts for a connection. But they don't really see it as harmful to other people. They don't even recognize they do it. They're lying to themselves first. No, that intent's not malevolent. Intent is actually benevolent. They're thinking they're helping things. They don't realize that it's self-centered and self-serving. Um, but they're so I would say it's on a continuum all the way from people who are just sort of harmful without knowing they're being harmful to people who are harmful and know that they're being harmful. So I would see it as kind of that kind of continuum. Covert narcissists are dangerous in the sense of we miss them. That's why to me they're dangerous is because they're so hard to spot. But when it really comes down to who's going to do more damage, and take it with somebody who's actually lived around with a malignant narcissist, oh no, they can do way more damage for sure. They'll harm you. A malignant narcissist will harm, because really a malignant narcissist is just code for somebody who actually has a lot of antisocial personality traits along with narcissistic personality traits. So they don't mind breaking the law. If they have a reason to do it and it serves them, they're willing to do whatever it takes to get even or to pursue things to their end, even if it means, thumbing the nose at the law. So, yeah, the more you help or do a favor for the narcissist, the more they make comments to your face about you and it does feel that way onwards. It feels that way because they don't respect those of us who don't see the world the way they do. I really want you guys to hear me on that. Your beautiful worldview, the way in which you see things as cooperative and possibly agreeable and everybody should be able to get along and we can make it right. The way we see that, they see that as foolishness and childish. They think that you're not being realistic. And so they feel contempt for you for that. They disrespect you for that. Because in their mind, the world's at war and you're just being gullible. Even the way that's how they would say it. You're just being gullible. You're not seeing things the way that, they would say that's a utopian perspective. Well, it's actually not. I do think that it is, ideally, the world should operate on collaboration and cooperation and collegiality and love. It should be like that. Yeah, Leslie, you're called a dreamer. Yeah. And I think actually the word dreamer is a beautiful word. I don't think that's a negative word, but they don't see it that way. They actually see that as you're Pollyannish, you're naive, and that they believe, because remember, they're superior people. They think they're superior. So they think that their worldview is superior, and they think they've got like some handle on truth that you don't handle. Exactly. Your perspective is inferior to them. Absolutely. So they think they have some handle on truth that you don't have, and that truth is the world's actually at war, and you're just being naive. You're not being realistic about it. And as a result, then they don't respect you because they see you as not seeing it as it really is. Oh, Maria, I'm so glad that your graduate's home. Give him or her a big hug, and I hope you have a wonderful evening with your son or daughter tonight. Yeah. So it's interesting. So what we're kind of talking about. This is where we're sort of flowing into as a topic, as a group. We're collectively, both on TikTok and YouTube. So let me stop and sort of break this out. I would love you guys. Not every narcissist is malignant. Not every narcissist has antisocial personality traits. They really don't. Not all of them don't. Think of narcissistic personality disorder as like a circle. It's a circle of people, a group of symptoms, okay? And then you've got the antisocial group of symptoms. It's like sociopathic and psychopathic. They're different symptoms. Now, I know there are people out there who will disagree with me, and that's okay. My experience clinically is that I have seen antisocial personality disorders who are not particularly narcissistic. I wouldn't say they rise to the category of MPD, but they have some narcissistic traits, but they don't rise to it. I do believe that's why think about it. American Psychological Association considers them two separate disorders. I have seen that they seem to be two separate disorders. Now, So they're two separate circles that are sit super close to each other. There's some crossover. So some people have both. They have traits of both. And some people have full personality disorders of both. They're fully MPD and they're fully ASPD, fully. And then there's some who are just one or the other. So I think kind of seeing it that way can really help you, because if you start looking for malignancy in a person and thinking that if they're not malignant, they're not narcissistic, you're going to miss a lot of narcissists. Because there's a lot of narcissists that are not malignant. They mean well, but they're not doing well. They don't do well by you, but they mean well by you. They think they're doing what's best for you while they're very self-centered. And I wish I had more freedom to talk about it, but I don't, because I just don't want to call people out. And I'm thinking of people in my head right now that don't know they're narcissistic, and that they would be really crushed to hear that they are. But if you look at their behavior, there's a lot of narcissistic traits, but they're not deliberately trying to break the law. They're not deliberately trying to lie. They're not deliberately trying to thumb their nose at civility in the world. They're not being ruthless or cruel, but they are really narcissistic. They're very arrogant, very self-centered. They're very exploitive, but they don't have the ASPD piece of it. Oh, I'm glad that makes you feel real, Leslie. I'm glad that's helping you today. Yeah, it is. JC, I agree. Hanging out and talking to other people in this circle is really wonderful, because we've been through the same thing. I agree with you, Kate. I think that's a so Kate just brought up a lot of celebrities seem to have a lot of narcissic traits, and I do agree. I think there's something kind of intoxicating about influence, and the more you get paid for just being a person, and sort of, things happen around you because of the power, for just the fact that you exist, you start to think somehow that you're different than other people, and that's not necessarily makes you different. But then if you buy into that and you have a lot of yes people in your life, it can get into a really dangerous situation. Really dangerous situation. That's a great question. So Onward asks, do all antisocial personality types, like sociopaths, do they all don't pay bills and stay disorganized and don't like pay taxes and don't hold down jobs? Do all of them do that? And all of them like don't take care of household stuff? No, actually, that's not true. So think of the antisocial personality disorders like in two big categories. There's the sociopaths, and this is by Robert Hare, Hare, and then also think of the sociopaths and psychopaths and sociopaths. Psychopaths tend to be more made, and they tend to be more robotic. So that would be the people who are stiff and stilted. They thumb their nose at the law. They do whatever they have to do to come out ahead. They're ruthless. I think a great example, if you guys ever watched the TV show, it's oh shoot, I'm blocking on the name. It's about a hospital. It's being modeled after a real hospital in New York. And they have a kid on there who's got a lot of antisocial personality traits. That kid would be a great example of that. They like live by the rules. They're almost like robots. They really like, and they're almost like schizoaffective personality disorder. There's something kind of odd about them, or schizotypal. There's something kind of like they don't have a lot of emotions. They don't know how to connect around emotions. So think of that group, and some of them have a lot of OCD. So you'll see a lot of like rigidity around things. But then you've got the type that's just sort of impulsive. I think sociopaths tend to have more impulse control problems. So as a result, that means they would forget to pay bills or think they don't need to pay bills, or why would you bother to do this or that, because who cares? Why bother pay taxes, because they feel like the government doesn't need it, the government's just using them. So yeah, I do think that's a subtype for sure. Yeah, so someone getting it. Yeah, Robin, I definitely hope that you can call for some help if you're in that situation, for sure. I got about 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to wrap it up today. Anybody else have some big questions you guys would like to ask me today? Casey, I do agree. It sucks how they do hold positions of power. They're attracted to positions of power, so they deliberately seek them out. Truth serum. I love the fact that you say your name is Truth Serums because you've been a truth teller. That's super cool. Thanks for sharing that. Oh, and thanks for saying how I communicate. I was actually feeling really self-conscious when I start to have a, so I have a TikTok that's going really, I'm sorry, a YouTube video that's really blowing up right now, which surprised me. And so you guys are, you joined probably because you saw that video. So I'm feeling a little self-conscious today. So I don't feel like I'm very eloquent. I don't feel eloquent at all. I feel like I'm stumbling over my words in it. So thank you for that. You made me feel better. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think there are more women who are covert narcissists than there are men, and I do think that it's a toxic combo, and I don't think we do enough talking about female narcissists, and that's a shame because they're almost in equal numbers to men, almost, not quite, but almost. Oh, Kate, that's a great idea. Kate said, I'd love to see a live stream about narcissistic personality disorder and power systems. Yeah, I bet it would bring in a toxic group, that's for sure. It really would. And it would be controversial. Almost too scary for me to want to talk about, honestly. Yeah, junk girl Patty, it is hard to know if your partner is narcissistic. I do, by the way, and I'll put the link in this today's video. There is a survey I have that's free that you're welcome to take. It says, "Am I the narcissist?" But you can take it for your partner. You can answer the questions as if your partner would do that. Onwards asks, what percentage of the people in the population have unhealthy narcissistic traits, even if it's unconscious? Okay, so that's a great question. I can't answer it exactly the way that you're asking it, but I can tell you what I know. So here's what I know. So I asked, or when you look at the NCHI, in other words, the government numbers on narcissism at the moment, it says roughly 7% of the world's, or 7% of the United States is narcissistic. 5% of women, 7% of men. So at the most 7%. Now, the problem is narcissists don't tend to get diagnosed, and that's called NPD. We're not talking about traits. We're talking about full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. How many people have traits? A lot. So I asked years ago, way back, I asked a colleague of mine who used to be the head of a state. He was the chairman of the disciplinary committee for psychologists in that state. So in other words, he disciplined, yeah, you 7%. You heard me right, user. So he saw he was part of the that would come in and make decisions about psychologists in that state who do things wrong. So he's seeing the worst of the psychologists. And so I asked him once, what percent, and he also was a like director of a inpatient unit that was very big and saw a lot of patients. So I said, what percentage of the world do you think is healthy? That was my question to him. He said 7%, SEVEN, 7%. Now, where he got that number, I don't know. But here's a question I asked Sandra Brown when I was talking to her privately before a webinar I had with her. You guys don't know who she is. She wrote the book, Women Who Love Psychopaths and Narcissistic People. Really great person, has done a lot of research, a lot of research. And I said, what percentage of the world do you think is predatory? And she said roughly 20%. And when you look at the statistics, so if you add up the 7% of men and women, and then you add in the ASP, which does not include ASPD, and it does not include the paranoid personality disorders either, which we never talk about. So if you add all those personalities up together and starting, yeah, you're reading your books, it's a great book. You put all that together, it's roughly 1 in 5. So 1 in 5 people are predatory. So I didn't answer how many people have narcissistic traits because I think you'd find that number, oh man, high. I don't even know high, like 30, 40% maybe higher. I don't know, a lot. But it does give us a lot of pause. We really need, here's what I do now when I go out and about in the world. I now don't go out and think the world's basically a good place. Now, it is a good place. I'm not saying it's not a good place. But I remind myself not to go out there and blindly trust people. The book we're talking about, Sandra Brown's called The Women Who Love Psychopaths. It's a really good book. But the world's not, the world's generally pretty safe most of the time. But not everybody's not safe. And 1 out of 5 persons is not safe at all. So I've learned to withhold judgment. That's what I do. I now do what I make people earn my trust. I just don't give trust away. I really make them earn it. So 7% of MPD based on reports. It's probably closer to 15% where I live. I had a malignant narcissist manager and a supervisor. Oh man, that's brutal. Alejandro, you'd think it was large, but 1 out of 5 is a lot of people, don't you think, Alejandro? It's a lot to me, in my opinion. So, but it does make you approach the world differently, for sure. It really it means that I'm more careful and I reserve judgment on everybody until I see what they do. I watch what they do and how they handle me and how they whether or not can they hear what I have to say, and they're going to create room for me. And then based on that means the degree that I'm going to like trust them or not. Yeah, Sandra Brown's is a really good book. If you guys are looking for a good book to just understand pathology and what happens in these types of relationships, it's a really good book for that. Well, that's true. AA, so you must be it's not accounting for comorbidity. So what do you think the rates are, the prevalent rates? I think that's close to 20% though. I really do. Because it's underreported. Remember, we're talking about people who actually make it into the office. And as a former clinician who diagnosed, I know we're not diagnosing many people. We're underdiagnosing people. So there's more people than we think. All right, you guys, this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for those of you who are, hey, April, so good to see you. For those of you who are new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to hit subscribe and so that you can follow so you know when I go live. And for those of you who don't know, I go live every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Every Tuesday. So, oh, Lifted Black, it's so nice to meet you. And thank you for saying that. I would love to see you guys back here next Tuesday at 4 p.m. You guys all have a fantastic, great day, okay? And thank you for being new and joining me. That means a lot.